The candlelight flickered across the stone walls of the kitchen, casting elongated shadows that danced like spectres in the corners. Ilara's fingers were cracked and bleeding, her nails broken from scrubbing the great iron pots used for the feast earlier that evening. The other servants had long since retired to their quarters, leaving her alone with the mountain of dishes Lord Barton had specifically ordered her to finish before dawn. "You spoke out of turn again, girl," the steward had hissed, spittle flying from his thin lips. "Perhaps a night without sleep will remind you of your place." Ilara plunged her hands back into the greasy water, wincing as the harsh lye soap burned the open cuts on her skin. At 23, she had spent 11 years as a castle slave, sold to the Barton family after her father's debts had mounted beyond recovery. She had learned early that silence was survival in Blackvale Castle, but lately she found herself unable to hold her tongue. 3 days ago, she had interrupted Lord Barton as he raised his whip to a young stable boy who had accidentally spilled water on the nobleman's riding boots. Yesterday, she had been caught teaching one of the scullery maids to read from scraps of discarded parchment. And today, she had committed the greatest offence of all. She had suggested, within earshot of Lady Barton, that perhaps the village children wouldn't be starving if the castle didn't demand such high taxes on the autumn harvest. A rat scurried across the floor, disappearing behind a stack of firewood. Ilara sighed, brushing a strand of copper hair from her face with her forearm. The castle was cruel, but it was all she had known for so long. Sometimes, in the rare, quiet moments like this, she allowed herself to remember fragments of her childhood. Her mother's lilac-scented embrace, the small cottage with its thatched roof, the feeling of grass between her toes as she ran through meadows that seemed endless to a child's eyes. "Foolish dreams," she muttered to herself, lifting another pot from the murky water. "Foolish girl." The great clock in the main hall tolled midnight, its deep resonance penetrating even the thick kitchen walls. Ilara's shoulders sagged with exhaustion, but she knew rest was still hours away. Outside, the autumn wind howled, rattling the shutters of the small window above the washing basin. Winter was approaching quickly this year, and with it would come the annual visit from the northern nobles, including him. Ilara's hands stilled in the water as unbidden thoughts of Lord Draven Ravencroft surfaced in her mind. The mysterious nobleman from the Northern Territories who visited Blackvale once a year, always during the darkest part of winter. She had only glimpsed him 3 times during her years of servitude, a tall, imposing figure with raven-black hair and skin so pale it seemed to glow in the moonlight. The other servants whispered about him when they thought no one was listening. They said he never ate at feasts, that he only arrived after sunset and departed before dawn, that livestock died mysteriously whenever he visited. Some called him vampire. Most were too afraid to call him anything at all. A sudden draught extinguished half the candles, plunging the kitchen into deeper darkness. Ilara froze, her senses alert to a change in the air, a heaviness, a presence. The hair on her arms rose as she slowly turned from the washing basin. She was no longer alone. A figure stood in the doorway, tall and still as the castle's stone gargoyles. For a moment, Ilara thought it might be the steward, come to assign yet another punishment. But this silhouette was different, broader in the shoulders, regal in its stillness. "You should be sleeping, little rebel," came a voice, deep and melodious, with an accent she couldn't place. "The castle walls carry whispers of your defiance." Lord Ravencroft stepped into the dim light, and Ilara's breath caught in her throat. He was more handsome than she remembered. Aristocratic features, carved as if from marble, eyes so dark they seemed to absorb the candlelight rather than reflect it. He wore riding clothes of fine black leather, a crimson cravat at his throat, providing the only splash of colour. "My lord," Ilara managed, dropping into a hasty curtsy, suddenly acutely aware of her sodden apron, her dishevelled hair, her reddened hands. "Forgive me. I didn't expect anyone to witness your midnight toil." He moved toward her with an unnatural grace, no footsteps audible on the stone floor. I arrived early this year. The winter follows at my heels. He was close now. Close enough that in the dim light she could see the flecks of crimson in his dark eyes. Close enough that she noticed he cast no shadow where he stood. "Tell me," he said, his voice dropping to something intimate, something dangerous. "Why does a kitchen slave risk the lash to speak her mind? What burns so fiercely within you that silence becomes impossible?" Elara should have been terrified. Every instinct told her to lower her eyes, to mumble apologies, to retreat. Instead, she found herself meeting his gaze directly. "Justice, my lord," she answered, her voice steadier than she felt, "or its absence." A smile curved his lips, revealing teeth too sharp to be entirely human. "Justice," he repeated, as if tasting the word. A rare delicacy in these realms. He reached toward her, and Elara flinched involuntarily, expecting punishment. Instead, his cold fingers gently lifted her hand from the washing basin, turning it to examine the cracked skin and bleeding cuts. "The Bartons treat their hunting hounds with more care," he observed, a dangerous edge entering his voice. "I am less valuable than a hound, my lord," Elara replied, unable to keep the bitterness from her tone. "At least, hounds serve a purpose beyond scrubbing and bowing." Lord Ravencroft's laughter was unexpected, a rich, melodious sound that seemed to fill the cavernous kitchen. "Oh, I think you serve a greater purpose than you know, little rebel." Before she could respond, he released her hand and stepped back, his expression shifting to one of calculation. "Return to your quarters," he commanded. "Tend to these wounds. Tomorrow night, when the castle sleeps, meet me in the North Tower Library." Elara blinked, confusion replacing her fear. "My lord, I'm not permitted in that part of the castle." "You will be," he said simply, "because I permit it." He reached into his cloak and produced a small vial of amber liquid, placing it on the edge of the washing basin. "For your hands, it will heal them before morning." Then he was gone, slipping from the kitchen like a shadow, leaving Elara to wonder if exhaustion had conjured the entire encounter. Only the small vial remained as evidence, glinting in the restored candlelight. Morning arrived with a brutal efficiency, sunlight streaming through the narrow window of the servants' quarters. Elara had barely slept, her mind replaying the midnight encounter, her eyes frequently dropping to her hands, which, true to Lord Ravencroft's word, had healed completely after she'd applied the mysterious salve. "Elara!" The voice of the head chambermaid, Agnes, shattered her reverie. "Stop your daydreaming. Lady Barton wants her chambers prepared for tonight's welcoming feast. Lord Ravencroft has arrived early this year." "Yes, I know," Elara murmured, then caught herself. "Yes, Agnes." The older woman narrowed her eyes. "What do you mean, you know? How would you know the comings and goings of nobility?" Elara quickly shook her head. "I only meant I overheard the steward mentioning it." Agnes seemed unconvinced, but was too busy to pursue the matter. "Well, get moving, and mind you stay out of trouble today. The whole castle's on edge with him here." Throughout the day, Elara moved through her tasks mechanically, her thoughts constantly drifting to the night ahead. What could Lord Ravencroft want with her? The rational part of her mind suggested caution. A slave summoned by a nobleman, especially one rumored to be something other than human, rarely ended well for the slave. But beneath her wariness lay something else, a flicker of hope that perhaps, somehow, her life was about to change. By mid-afternoon, rumors of Lord Ravencroft's presence had spread through the castle like wildfire. Servants whispered in corners about fresh blood on his riding cloak, about the covered cage his attendants had carried into his chambers, about the explicit instructions that no servant was to enter his rooms during daylight hours. "They say he drinks the blood of virgin maids," whispered Marta, a plump kitchen girl, as they polished silver for the evening feast. "That's why he comes to these remote castles, to find prey the world won't miss." "Nonsense," replied the cook's assistant, though he nervously fingered the garlic bulb he'd begun keeping in his pocket. "If he were truly a monster, would the nobles receive him so warmly?" "The nobles fear him," countered Marta. "Why else would Lord Barton agree to host him every year? I heard—" "Enough," Ilara interrupted, the silver chalice in her hands gleaming in the afternoon light. "Speculation makes for poor company and poorer work." Marta scowled. "Oh, listen to her. Giving orders now. Haven't you learned your lesson about speaking out of turn, Ilara? One day that tongue of yours will see you dead." "Or worse," added the assistant with a meaningful glance. Ilara remained silent, focusing on her work, but Marta was not finished. "Perhaps we should tell the steward about her attitude. Another night scrubbing pots might teach her humility." "Perhaps," Ilara said quietly, setting down the polished chalice with deliberate care. "You should concern yourselves less with my tongue and more with your own tasks. Unless you wish to explain to Lady Barton why the silver isn't ready for tonight's feast." Marta's face flushed with anger. "You think you're better than us, don't you? Just because you can read those stolen scraps of parchment? Just because your hair is pretty and your face hasn't been pocked by pox? Well, you're nothing, Ilara. Just a slave like the rest of us, only more foolish for forgetting your place." The words stung, but Ilara had endured worse. She gathered the polished chalices onto a tray and left without another word, her steps quickening as she headed toward the great hall where the feast would be held. The encounter with Marta had shaken her more than she cared to admit, not because of the girl's cruelty, but because of the truth in her words. Ilara was nothing in this world, a possession to be used and discarded at the whim of her masters. And yet, Lord Ravenscroft had looked at her as if she were something else entirely, something valuable. The great hall was a flurry of activity as servants prepared for the evening's festivities. Garlands of autumn flowers and berries adorned the stone walls, and dozens of candles were being placed in the iron chandeliers. At the center of it all stood Lady Barton, imperious in a gown of midnight blue, directing the preparations with sharp commands. "No, you fool!" She snapped at a footman struggling with a heavy tapestry. Lord Ravenscroft specifically requested the northern wall remain unadorned. "Remove it at once." Her cold gaze fell on Ilara as she approached with the tray of polished silver. "Ah, the outspoken one," she said, her thin lips curving into a cruel smile. "I trust your night of dishwashing has taught you the value of silence." Ilara lowered her eyes, the practiced gesture of submission. "Yes, my lady." "Good. Place those on the high table and then assist with the wine selection. Lord Ravenscroft has particular tastes." As Ilara arranged the chalices on the table, she felt Lady Barton's eyes still upon her, calculating and cold. When she turned, the noblewoman was indeed watching her, head tilted in assessment. "Strange," Lady Barton mused almost to herself. "I never noticed before how unusually colored your eyes are. Almost amber in this light." Ilara remained still, unsure how to respond to the observation. "It's said," Lady Barton continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper, "that Lord Ravenscroft is drawn to unusual things, peculiar things." Her smile tightened. "Let us hope, for your sake, that you are not peculiar enough to catch his attention." With that cryptic warning, she swept away, leaving Ilara with a chill that had nothing to do with the draughty castle air. Oh, the feast that evening was a spectacle of excess, with nobles from neighbouring estates arriving to pay respects to the mysterious Lord Ravenscroft. Ilara moved among them like a ghost, refilling wine glasses, replacing empty platters, all while keeping her eyes carefully lowered. But she was acutely aware of him at the high table, seated at Lord Barton's right hand, barely touching the food placed before him, his dark gaze occasionally sweeping the hall until, she was certain, it found her. As midnight approached, the feast showed no signs of concluding. The nobles were deep in their cups, their laughter growing louder, their gestures more expansive. Ilara's arms ached from carrying heavy trays, and her feet throbbed in her worn leather shoes. And still, at the back of her mind, the command echoed, "Meet me in the North Tower Library." How was she to obey when the feast continued? How was she to slip away unnoticed? The answer came unexpectedly. As she passed behind Lord Ravencroft's chair with a pitcher of wine, his hand moved with inhuman speed, catching her wrist in a grip that was firm but not painful. "My glass requires filling," he said, loud enough for those nearby to hear. Ilara nodded, careful to keep her expression neutral as she leaned forward to pour. As she did, he spoke again, his voice so low that only she could hear. "The hour approaches. Go now. I shall ensure no one follows." With trembling hands, Ilara placed the wine pitcher on the table and backed away with a curtsy. She slipped through the servants' passage behind the great hall, heart hammering against her ribs. The North Tower Library, forbidden territory for someone of her station, awaited. The castle corridors grew darker and more deserted as she made her way through the labyrinthine passageways. Torches grew scarcer, and the worn stone beneath her feet gave way to polished marble as she entered the noble's wing. Twice she ducked into shadowed alcoves as guards passed, their chainmail rattling in the silence. A carved wooden staircase spiraled upward into the North Tower. Ilara hesitated at its base, glancing over her shoulder. The punishment for a servant found in this part of the castle would be severe, perhaps even fatal. Yet the memory of Lord Ravencroft's dark eyes compelled her forward. The library door was heavy oak, inlaid with silver that gleamed in the faint moonlight filtering through narrow windows. Ilara pushed it open, wincing at the low creak of ancient hinges. Inside, the circular room took her breath away. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling, more books than she had ever imagined existed. The scent of aged parchment and leather bindings filled the air, mingling with the smoky aroma of beeswax candles that illuminated the space with a warm, golden light. At the center stood a massive table carved from a single piece of dark wood, its surface inlaid with strange symbols that seemed to shift when she looked at them directly. Ilara stepped forward, drawn to a particularly ornate volume, displayed on a pedestal. Its cover featured intricate engravings of celestial bodies and creatures she couldn't identify. As her fingers hovered over it, a voice broke the silence. The Celestial Bestiary, one of only 3 copies remaining in the known world. Lord Ravencroft materialized from the shadows between the bookshelves, moving with that same uncanny silence. He had changed from his feast attire into a simpler black tunic and trousers, though the crimson cravat remained at his throat. "My lord," Ilara said, quickly withdrawing her hand, "I came as you commanded." "Not commanded, Ilara, requested." He moved closer, studying her face. "There is a difference, one the Bartons would do well to learn." "Forgive me, but why am I here?" She forced herself to meet his gaze, despite the instinct to look away. "Surely you didn't summon a kitchen slave to discuss rare books?" A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Direct, aren't you? Another quality the Bartons would despise." He gestured to 2 chairs positioned near the fireplace. "Please, sit." Ilara perched uncertainly on the edge of the velvet-upholstered chair, hyper-aware of the incongruity of her coarse servant's clothing against the luxurious fabric. "Tell me about your dreams," Lord Ravencroft said without preamble, settling into the chair opposite her. The question caught her off guard. "My dreams, my lord? Yes, not the foolish ones you dismiss when alone in the kitchen at midnight. The others, the ones that wake you trembling in the dark." A chill crawled up Ilara's spine. How could he know about those? The dreams that had plagued her since childhood, of flying above ancient forests, of animals speaking in human tongues, of a mountain crowned with blue fire. "I don't understand," she said carefully. "Dreams are merely the mind's wanderings during sleep." "Are they? Then why do yours always feature the same mountain, the same blue flame?" His voice dropped lower. "The same silver wolf with amber eyes?" Ilara shot to her feet, knocking over a small side table. A porcelain figurine crashed to the floor, shattering into countless pieces. "How could you possibly know that?" she whispered. Instead of answering, Lord Ravencroft rose and walked to one of the bookshelves. He extracted a thin volume bound in faded red leather and returned to her side. "Because," he said, opening the book to reveal pages of elegant script interspersed with intricate illustrations, "you are not the first of your kind I have encountered." Ilara stared at the open page. It showed a detailed drawing of a young woman transforming, her human features elongating into the muzzle of a wolf, her hands becoming paws, her eyes burning with an amber fire identical to the one in Ilara's dreams. "What is this?" Her voice had become a barely audible whisper. "This, little rebel, is your heritage, a lineage hidden from you, but not erased." Lord Ravencroft turned another page, revealing a map with a familiar mountain clearly marked. "The dreams that haunt you are not dreams at all, but memories, not yours, but those of your ancestors passed through blood." "That's impossible." Ilara shook her head vehemently. "My parents were simple farmers. My father was a drunk who gambled away our land and sold me to pay his debts. The man who raised you was indeed those things, but he was not your father by blood." Lord Ravencroft closed the book gently. "You are the last descendant of the Lunaris bloodline, shapeshifters who once ruled the Northern Territories alongside my kind." "Your kind?" Ilara echoed faintly. Lord Ravencroft's eyes flashed crimson in the firelight. "Surely you've heard the whispers. The servants are more perceptive than the nobles give them credit for." "Vampire," she breathed, the words slipping out before she could stop it. He inclined his head slightly. "We prefer the term nightwalkers." But yes, a distant part of Ilara's mind noted the absurdity of the situation, standing in a forbidden library, discussing folklore creatures with a man who claimed to be one. And yet, another part of her thrummed with recognition, as if pieces of a puzzle she hadn't known she was solving were finally falling into place. "If what you say is true," she said slowly, "why tell me now? Why have you visited this castle for years without speaking to me?" "I had to be certain. The Lunaris line was thought extinct after the Great Purge a century ago, when humans hunted down and slaughtered most of our kinds." His expression darkened with ancient anger. "I first sensed something different about you 3 years ago. Your scent marked you as other than human. But it wasn't until last year, when you intervened to save that stable boy, that I suspected your true nature. The Lunaris were always defenders, protectors of the weak, even at great cost to themselves." "And what does this mean for me?" Ilara asked, struggling to process the enormity of his claims. "It means, Ilara Lunaris, that you have a choice to make." Lord Ravencroft moved to the window, gazing out at the night sky where clouds partially obscured the moon. "Remain here as a slave, your heritage forever buried, or leave with me tonight and reclaim your birthright." "Leave? I can't simply walk out of Blackvale Castle. I'm property. Lord Barton would hunt me down, and Lord Barton would not dare challenge me." The dangerous edge returned to Ravencroft's voice. "Not if he wishes to keep his head attached to his shoulders." A commotion outside the library door interrupted them. Raised voices, heavy footsteps, the metallic sound of swords being drawn. Ilara froze, but Lord Ravencroft appeared unconcerned. The door burst open, and Lord Barton stormed in, his face flushed with wine and rage, flanked by 4 armed guards. His small eyes bulged when he saw Ilara. "So the rumors are true," he spat. "My servant, consorting with the Northern Lord." He turned to Ravencroft, struggling to control his trembling. "My lord, forgive this intrusion. This slave will be severely punished for disturbing you." Lord Ravencroft regarded Barton with cold disdain. "She is here at my invitation, Barton." "Your invitation?" Lord Barton's confusion gave way to a sycophantic smile. "Ah, I see. Had I known you desired company, I could have arranged for someone more suitable than this troublesome girl." "You misunderstand me," Ravencroft said, each syllable like ice. "I did not summon her for the purpose you imply. I summoned her because she does not belong to you." "She never did." Lord Barton's smile faltered. "My lord, I purchased this girl legally 11 years ago. I have the documentation." You purchased a human child. This woman is not human. Lord Ravencroft moved to Ilara's side, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. She is Lunaris. The colour drained from Lord Barton's face. The guards exchanged nervous glances, one making a hasty sign against evil. "That's not possible," Barton whispered. "The shapeshifters were exterminated generations ago." "Not all of them." Lord Ravencroft smiled, revealing elongated canines. "Just as not all of my kind perished in your human purges." Ilara watched the exchange with growing unease. These powerful men were discussing her fate as if she weren't present, as they had done her entire life. A familiar anger kindled in her chest, spreading warmth through her limbs. Her vision sharpened suddenly, the dimly lit room becoming as clear as daylight. "I can speak for myself," she said, her voice stronger than she intended. All eyes turned to her. Lord Barton's incredulous, the guards fearful, Lord Ravencroft's approving. "I may not understand everything about my past," she continued, "but I know what I am not. I am not property to be bought and sold. I am not a tool to be used until I break, and I am not staying in this castle one night longer." Lord Barton's face contorted with fury. "You insolent little—" He raised his hand to strike her. What happened next occurred too quickly for human eyes to follow. Ilara felt something awaken inside her, a primal force that had lain dormant all her life. Her body moved instinctively, catching Lord Barton's wrist in mid-strike with a strength she didn't know she possessed. A growl rumbled from her throat, low and threatening, and her fingernails lengthened to sharp points against his skin. "You will never touch me again," she said, her voice barely recognizable to her own ears. Lord Barton's eyes widened in terror as he stared into her face. "Your eyes!" he gasped. "They're glowing!" One of the guards, panicking, drew his sword and lunged toward her. Before the blade could reach her, Lord Ravencroft was there, moving with supernatural speed. He caught the guard by the throat, lifting him effortlessly off the ground. "I wouldn't," he said softly, before flinging the man across the room into a bookshelf, which collapsed under the impact. The remaining guards dropped their weapons, backing toward the door. Lord Barton, freed from Ilara's grip, stumbled after them, clutching his wrist where her nails had drawn blood. "This isn't over," he snarled from the doorway. "Creature or not, no one defies me in my own castle." "This was never your castle, Barton," Lord Ravencroft replied. "Merely a stone prison you've been permitted to occupy. Go now, while I still allow it." When they were alone again, Ilara stared at her hands in disbelief. The nails had returned to normal, but she could still feel the power that had surged through her, wild and untamed, yet somehow familiar. "What's happening to me?" she whispered. "Your transformation has begun," Lord Ravencroft explained. "The full moon approaches, and with it, your first true shift." He pointed to the scattered red book on the floor, where it had fallen during the confrontation. "The text explains it better than I can. Your kind typically experience their first transformation at puberty, but sometimes, when a Lunaris child is separated from their pack, the ability remains dormant until triggered by extreme emotion or proximity to others of magical blood." Ilara retrieved the book with trembling hands. "You said I have a choice, but it seems my body is already making decisions without my consent. The shift is inevitable now that it has started, but what you do with your power, that choice remains yours." Lord Ravencroft moved to a concealed cabinet and removed a small bundle wrapped in oiled cloth. "Regardless of your decision, you cannot stay here. Barton will return with more men." He unwrapped the bundle to reveal a dagger with a silver hilt shaped like a wolf's head, its eyes set with amber stones that caught the firelight. "This belonged to your grandmother, Lyra Lunaris. She entrusted it to me before she died, hoping her line might someday be restored." Ilara took the dagger, surprised by how perfectly it fit her hand. "You knew my grandmother. She saved my life during the Great Purge, at the cost of revealing her own nature to the human hunters." His voice softened with rare emotion. "We were close, and my parents, my real parents, Your mother was Lyra's daughter, Sarah. Your father was human, a healer named Gareth, who treated Sarah when she was injured escaping the hunters. They fell in love, married in secret." His expression darkened. "They were betrayed when you were barely a year old. Your father died trying to give your mother time to escape with you. She managed to hide you with a human family before the hunters caught her." Ilara closed her eyes, absorbing the tragic history of parents she couldn't remember. "And now Barton knows what I am, which means we must leave immediately." Lord Ravencroft moved to the window and pushed it open. The cold night air rushed in, carrying the scent of pine and distant snow. "Can you trust me, Ilara Lunaris?" She clutched the dagger, her heritage, and looked at the vampire lord who had revealed her true nature. Trust did not come easily after a lifetime of servitude and betrayal. "And yet, I don't seem to have much choice, do I?" she said with a wry smile. "There is always a choice." He extended his hand. "Even if sometimes all options seem equally terrifying." From below came sounds of commotion, shouts, orders being given, the heavy tread of armored men. Barton was gathering his forces. Ilara took a deep breath and placed her hand in Lord Ravencroft's cold one. "Then I choose to find out who I really am." He pulled her toward the open window. "My carriage waits in the forest beyond the north wall. We'll have to move quickly. The wall is 30 feet high," Ilara protested, peering down at the dizzying drop. Lord Ravencroft's lips curved into a smile that was both terrifying and exhilarating. Fortunately, neither vampires nor werewolves fear heights. Without warning, he wrapped an arm around her waist and stepped out into the empty air. Instead of falling, they seemed to float, descending gracefully to the courtyard below. The moment their feet touched the ground, shouts erupted from the castle entrance. A dozen armed men poured out, led by Lord Barton himself. "Run!" Lord Ravencroft commanded, pulling her toward the outer wall. "Your instincts will guide you." As they raced across the moonlit courtyard, arrows whistled through the air around them. Ilara's body responded with impossible speed, dodging projectiles she shouldn't have been able to see in the darkness. Her legs moved faster than they ever had, her lungs expanding with the cold night air, her senses sharpening until she could hear the heartbeats of the men pursuing them. They reached the towering north wall, its ancient stones offering no visible handholds. Lord Ravencroft released her hand. "Climb," he said simply. "I can't possibly—" "Trust your body, Ilara. It knows what to do." Their pursuers were closing in, torches illuminating the fury on Lord Barton's face. With no time to argue, Ilara placed her hands against the cold stone and was astonished when her fingers found imperceptible cracks to grip. Her body moved with newfound agility, scaling the vertical surface as if she'd been climbing mountains all her life. Lord Ravencroft ascended beside her, moving with inhuman grace. Below, Barton bellowed orders to his archers. "Bring them down! 5 gold pieces to the man who kills the girl!" Arrows clattered against the stonework around them. One grazed Ilara's shoulder, tearing her dress and drawing a line of blood. She gasped at the sharp pain but didn't slow her ascent. They reached the top of the wall, just as a second volley of arrows launched. Lord Ravencroft pulled Ilara down against the parapet, shielding her body with his own. An arrow struck his back with a dull thud, but he showed no reaction beyond a slight grimace. "Are you hurt?" he asked, examining her bleeding shoulder. "It's nothing," she assured him, though the wound stung fiercely. To her amazement, even as she watched, the bleeding slowed, the edges of the cut beginning to close. "Is this part of being what I am? Enhanced healing. One of many gifts you're about to discover." He glanced over the wall to the dark forest beyond. "My carriage is waiting at the tree line, but there are guards patrolling the outer grounds. Can't we just jump?" Ilara gestured to the ground far below. "We could, but a fall from this height would injure you, healing abilities notwithstanding." He removed the arrow from his back with a fluid motion, tossing it aside. "We'll need a distraction." As if in response to his words, a commotion arose from the opposite side of the castle, shouting followed by the orange glow of flames. A fire had broken out in the eastern wing, drawing guards away from the north wall. Lord Ravencroft's eyes narrowed. Convenient timing. Did you arrange this? Ilara asked. No, he replied, scanning the darkness. But it seems we have an ally. Taking advantage of the chaos, they descended the outer wall. Once on the ground, they sprinted toward the forest, keeping to the shadows. They had nearly reached the tree line when a figure stepped into their path. The steward, Barton's cruel right hand, his thin face contorted with hatred. I always knew there was something unnatural about you, he hissed at Ilara, raising a crossbow. Lord Barton may want you alive, but I'll take my chances with your corpse. Before he could fire, a dark shape burst from the underbrush, tackling him to the ground. The crossbow discharged harmlessly into the air as the steward struggled against his attacker, a massive wolf with silver-grey fur that gleamed in the moonlight. Ilara froze, watching in astonishment as the wolf pinned the steward, jaws hovering inches from the man's throat. A warning growl rumbled from its chest. "Ilara, come!" Lord Ravencroft urged, pulling her toward a black carriage that had emerged from the trees, drawn by two horses with eyes that glowed red in the darkness. She hesitated, unable to tear her gaze from the wolf. It turned its head toward her, and Ilara gasped. Its eyes were a brilliant amber, identical to her own. "Who?" she began. "Later," Ravencroft insisted. "We must go now." As they reached the carriage, the wolf released the terrified steward and bounded toward them. In mid-leap, its form shimmered and changed, landing beside the carriage as a woman with long, silver-streaked black hair and familiar amber eyes. "You cut it rather close, brother," she said to Lord Ravencroft, pulling a cloak around her naked shoulders. "Impeccable timing as always, Lyra," he replied. Ilara stared at the woman in shock. "Lyra? But you said my grandmother was dead." The woman's amber eyes, so like Ilara's own, crinkled with a smile both fierce and tender. "Death, my dear granddaughter, is often negotiable in our world." She extended a hand toward Ilara. "We have much to discuss, but first we must put as much distance as possible between us and Blackvale Castle." Behind them, more guards were pouring through the castle gates, torches illuminating their pursuit. In the distance, Ilara could hear Lord Barton shouting promises of retribution. The woman who claimed to be her grandmother, a woman who had transformed from wolf to human before Ilara's eyes, climbed into the carriage. Lord Ravencroft followed, extending his hand once more to Ilara. Standing at the threshold between her life of servitude and an uncertain future, filled with creatures she'd thought existed only in fairy tales, Ilara hesitated. Her hand moved to the wolf-headed dagger now tucked in her belt. Her heritage, her birthright. "The choice remains yours," Lord Ravencroft reminded her softly. "Even now." The sound of approaching guards grew louder. Ilara looked back at Blackvale Castle one last time, the prison that had held her for 11 years. Then she took Ravencroft's hand and stepped into the carriage, closing the door on her old life as it pulled away into the darkness of the night. The carriage tore through the night, its spectral horses moving with unnatural speed, their hooves barely seeming to touch the ground as they navigated the treacherous forest path. Inside, Ilara sat rigid on the velvet seat, acutely aware of her companion's eyes upon her, her grandmother, supposedly dead, studying her with fierce pride, and Lord Ravencroft watching with that same calculating assessment she'd first seen in the castle kitchen. "You have her eyes, Lyra," Lord Ravencroft remarked, breaking the tense silence. "And her stubborn chin." "But Sarah's hair," Lyra replied, reaching out to touch a strand of Ilara's copper locks. "Like autumn leaves in sunlight." Ilara flinched away from the touch. "You were dead," she said flatly. "He told me you died during the Great Purge." "A necessary deception," Lyra sighed, withdrawing her hand. "Until we knew you were safe, knowledge of my survival would have put you at greater risk." "Safe?" Ilara laughed bitterly. "I spent 11 years as a slave, beaten for speaking out of turn, worked until my hands bled. If that was safety, I'd hate to see danger." Lyra's eyes flashed with regret and anger. I spent those same 11 years searching for you, child. When your mother hid you with that farmer, none of us knew where you were. By the time Draven traced rumors of a copper-haired girl sold to Blackvale Castle, approaching you directly would have drawn the attention of those who still hunt our kind. The carriage jolted violently as it hit a rut in the path. Through the window, Ilara could see they were traveling deeper into the forest, away from any road she knew. "Where are you taking me?" she demanded. "Home," Lyra said simply. Before Ilara could question further, Lord Ravencroft raised his hand for silence. "We're being followed," he said, his voice hardening as he peered through the rear window. Ilara turned to look. In the distance, pinpricks of torchlight bobbed through the trees. At least a dozen of them, moving fast. "Barton's men," she whispered. "Not just his men," Ravencroft corrected grimly. "Hunters. I can smell the silver and wolfsbane." Lyra cursed under her breath. He must have had them waiting. This was planned. "What do you mean, planned?" Ilara asked, clutching the seat as the carriage accelerated to an even more dangerous speed. "Barton knows what you are," Lyra explained. "Not by coincidence. Someone told him." Ravencroft's eyes narrowed. "The timing of your first manifestation, the immediate availability of hunters, equipped specifically to track our kinds. This was a trap, and we walked right into it." The realization hit Ilara like a physical blow. "They wanted me to run. They've been waiting for this." "But why?" Lyra wondered aloud. "What value is one Lunaris girl to them after all these years?" "The same value as the last descendant of any dying bloodline," Ravencroft replied darkly. "Power!" A sudden impact rocked the carriage, nearly throwing Ilara from her seat. Through the window she glimpsed a rider alongside them, his face hidden beneath a hood, a crossbow raised for another shot. Before he could fire, Ravencroft thrust his arm out the window, moving faster than her eyes could track. There was a sickening crunch, a cry cut short, and the rider disappeared from view. "We can't outrun them all," Lyra said, shifting in her seat as if preparing to transform again. "Not with the girl untrained." "I have a name," Ilara snapped, fear making her voice sharp, "and I'm sitting right here." Her grandmother gave her an approving look. "You certainly have our family's spirit, Ilara, but spirit alone won't save you tonight. You need to listen carefully now. Can you do that?" Before she could answer, another impact struck the carriage, this time from above. The roof splintered as something heavy landed on it, something that moved like a man, but growled like a beast. "Hunter!" Ravencroft hissed, reaching for the door. "No!" Lyra stopped him with a hand on his arm. "It's my turn." She turned to Ilara, eyes already beginning to glow brighter. "Whatever happens, stay with Draven. He'll protect you until I return." "Return from where?" Ilara cried, but her grandmother was already shifting, her body contorting in a way that should have been grotesque, but instead possessed a strange, wild grace. In seconds, the silver wolf stood where the woman had been, its massive form filling half the carriage. With one powerful leap, Lyra crashed through the damaged roof and onto the path behind them. Ilara heard snarls, screams, the thud of bodies hitting the ground, and then silence as the carriage raced onward, leaving the sounds of battle behind. "She'll be all right," Ravencroft said, though Ilara hadn't asked. "Your grandmother has survived worse than a few human hunters." "Why do they hate us so much?" Ilara asked, staring at her hands, remembering how they had changed when she confronted Lord Barton. "What did we ever do to them?" Ravencroft's expression softened marginally. "Fear, Ilara. Humans fear what they cannot control, what they cannot understand, and what humans fear, they destroy." The carriage suddenly veered sharply off the path, plunging deeper into the untamed forest. Branches whipped against the windows as they crashed through underbrush no normal carriage could navigate. "We're changing course," Ravencroft explained. "The main party of hunters will follow your grandmother's trail. We'll take a more challenging route. And what happens when we reach wherever we're going? More running? More hiding?" Ilara couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. "Is this what my life is to be now? trading one prison for another? No prison awaits you, Ravencroft said firmly. Only your birthright, if you're strong enough to claim it. Before she could respond, the carriage slowed abruptly. Through the window, Elara saw they had reached a sheer rock face that rose into darkness, disappearing among the trees above. "We continue on foot from here," Ravencroft said, opening the door and extending his hand. "The path ahead is too narrow for the carriage." Elara hesitated only briefly before taking his cold hand. As her feet touched the forest floor, the full impact of the night's events crashed over her. Just hours ago, she had been a slave scrubbing pots in Blackvale Castle. Now she stood in the wilderness with a vampire, pursued by hunters, while her werewolf grandmother fought for their escape. The carriage melted away behind them, literally melted, the black wood and metal liquefying into shadow that seeped into the ground like spilled ink. "An illusion?" she gasped. "A construct," Ravencroft corrected. "Real enough when needed, but not bound to permanent form." He led her toward what appeared to be solid rock, but as they approached, Elara saw a narrow fissure, barely wide enough for a person to slip through sideways. "This tunnel leads through the mountain," he explained. "The hunters won't follow us here. The passage is warded against humans." "Warded? With magic?" Despite everything, Elara found herself hesitating at this new revelation. Ravencroft's lips quirked in the ghost of a smile. "Did you think vampires and werewolves were the extent of the world's wonders, little rebel?" Inside the fissure, darkness swallowed them whole. Elara pressed forward, the rough stones scraping her shoulders on either side. She could see nothing, but Ravencroft moved ahead with confidence, still holding her hand to guide her. "Your night vision will improve after your first full transformation," he said, as if sensing her discomfort. "For now, trust me to lead you." They walked for what seemed like hours through the pitch-black passage that twisted and turned, sometimes widening enough for them to walk side by side, other times narrowing until Elara had to turn sideways and inch forward. The air grew progressively colder, carrying a strange metallic scent she couldn't identify. "Where exactly are we going?" she finally asked, her voice echoing oddly in the confined space. "To the Sanctum of the Moon," Ravencroft replied. "The last stronghold of your mother's people. And of yours," she ventured. A pause. "No, my kind have our own sanctuaries. But the alliance between Nightwalkers and Lunaris is ancient, older than the human kingdoms that now hunt us." The passage began to slope upward, the climb becoming steeper until Elara was practically crawling. Her muscles burned with the effort, her torn dress catching on the jagged stone. "Almost there," Ravencroft encouraged from above. "Look ahead." Elara raised her eyes and gasped. Far above, a faint blue light shimmered, casting ethereal patterns across the stone walls of the tunnel. As they climbed toward it, the light grew stronger, pulsing like a heartbeat. When they finally emerged, Elara stood transfixed by the sight before her. They had reached a vast cavern within the mountain, its ceiling opening to the night sky, where a nearly full moon hung like a silver coin. The walls of the cavern were studded with thousands of crystals that caught the moonlight and refracted it throughout the space, creating the blue glow she had seen from below. At the center of the cavern lay a perfectly circular pool of water, its surface so still it mirrored the moon above with flawless clarity. Surrounding the pool were stone structures, dwellings, altars, archways, all carved directly from the mountain rock, with such precision they seemed to flow organically from the cavern walls. "The Sanctum of the Moon," Ravencroft said quietly, "hidden from human eyes for 3 centuries. "It's empty," Elara observed, her voice hushed in the vast space. No people moved among the stone dwellings, no fires burned, no signs of life disturbed the perfect stillness. "Not empty," came a new voice, deep and resonant. "Waiting." From the shadows beyond the pool stepped a massive man with skin the color of burnished copper and a beard streaked with silver. His eyes, amber like Elara's own, regarded her with solemn assessment. "So Lyra found you at last, daughter of Sarah," he said, approaching with surprising grace for one so large. "I am Thorn, guardian of the sanctum and brother to your grandmother." "My great-uncle," Ilara said faintly, overwhelmed by yet another revelation. Thorn nodded, then turned to Ravencroft with a frown. "Where is Lyra?" Providing a distraction, hunters followed us from Blackvale. Thorn's expression darkened. "Barton and others. This was coordinated, Thorn. They knew what she was. They were waiting." The large man cursed, the sound rumbling through the cavern like distant thunder. "Then we have even less time than we thought." He fixed his amber gaze on Ilara. "The moon will be full tomorrow night. You must be prepared." "Prepared for what?" Ilara demanded, her patience finally breaking. "Since the moment I left that castle, I've been running and hiding without a single straight answer from any of you. I deserve to know what's happening to me, what you expect of me." Thorn and Ravencroft exchanged a look that held volumes of unspoken communication. Finally, Thorn nodded. "Come," he said, gesturing toward the pool. "I will show you what words cannot explain." He led them to the edge of the circular pool, where the water remained impossibly still despite their approach. Ilara peered into its depths, but saw only the reflected moon and stars. "The pool of memory holds the collective wisdom of the Lunaris bloodline," Thorn explained. "Every birth, death, triumph and tragedy of our people is recorded here." He knelt at the water's edge and motioned for Ilara to do the same. "Place your hand on the surface," he instructed. "Don't be afraid." Hesitantly, Ilara extended her hand toward the water. As her fingertips touched the surface, the pool remained solid as glass, not water at all, but something other. Ripples of blue light spread from her touch, and suddenly the reflected moon vanished, replaced by a cascade of images that flowed beneath her palm like living dreams. She saw wolves running through ancient forests, shifting to human form to build great stone cities with their bare hands. She saw her people dancing beneath the full moon, their bodies caught in the beautiful agony of transformation. She witnessed the first alliance with the Nightwalkers, a solemn blood oath between the Lord of Vampires and the Queen of Werewolves. Then darker images emerged, humans with torches and silver weapons, hunting parties driving her ancestors from their homes, public executions where captured Lunaris were forced to transform before being slaughtered. She saw her grandmother, younger but unmistakable, fighting alongside a younger version of Ravencroft, both covered in blood as they defended a mountain pass against overwhelming odds. Finally, she saw her mother, a woman with Ilara's copper hair and fierce eyes, clutching an infant to her chest as she fled through the night, pursued by shadowy figures. The image shifted to show her mother placing the baby with a sleeping human couple in a humble cottage, tears streaming down her face as she kissed the child's forehead one last time before disappearing into the darkness. Ilara jerked her hand away from the pool, gasping as the connection broke. Tears she hadn't realized she was shedding splashed onto the stone beneath her knees. "Now you understand," Thorn said gently. "You are the last pure-blooded female of the royal Lunaris line, the last who can bear children of our kind, the last who can ensure our survival," Ravencroft added quietly. The weight of their words pressed down on Ilara like a physical burden. "So that's why the hunters want me," she whispered. "To end your bloodline forever." "Yes," Thorn confirmed. "But that's not all they seek. The full moon approaches, your first transformation, and with it comes the awakening." "What awakening?" "Every royal Lunaris experiences a unique awakening during their first transformation," Ravencroft explained. "A manifestation of power beyond mere shapeshifting. Your grandmother can command lesser wolves. Your mother could heal with a touch." "And me?" Ilara asked, though she dreaded the answer. Thorn and Ravencroft exchanged another significant look. "We don't know," Thorn admitted. "But the hunters do, or believe they do. Someone has told them what power you will manifest, and they fear it enough to risk exposing themselves after decades of shadow games." A distant howl echoed through the cavern, a warning call that sent Thorn and Ravencroft into immediate alert. "Lyra returns," Thorn said, moving swiftly toward one of the stone archways, "and she brings trouble." Moments later, the silver wolf burst into the cavern, blood matting her fur, eyes wild with urgency. Behind her came others, wolves of various colors, some limping, all bearing wounds of battle. As Lyra transformed back to human form, Ravencroft threw his cloak around her shoulders. Her face was grim, a deep cut running from temple to jaw. "The hunters weren't just following us," she gasped, still catching her breath. "They were herding us. There are more, dozens more, approaching from the south and east passes." "Impossible," Thorn growled. "Those paths are warded." "The wards have been broken," Lyra cut him off. "From within." A heavy silence fell over the gathering. "Betrayal," Ravencroft said softly, his crimson eyes scanning the assembled wolves who had followed Lyra. "Someone has betrayed the sanctum." "It doesn't matter now," Lyra insisted. "They'll reach the outer caverns by dawn. We need to move Ilara deeper into the mountain, to the Chamber of Ascension." "It's too soon," Thorn objected. "She hasn't been prepared. The awakening could kill her if she's not ready." "Better she die attempting her birthright than let the hunters take her," Lyra snapped. Ilara stepped forward. "Stop talking about me as if I'm not here. This is my life, my body, my awakening. Whatever that means, I decide what happens next." The assembled wolves and vampires fell silent, all eyes turning to her. In that moment, despite her torn servant's dress and the dirt smudged on her face, she stood with the authority of the royal blood that flowed in her veins. "I won't run anymore," she declared, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. "I won't hide while others die protecting me. If this power is truly mine by birthright, then I will face it on my terms." A slow smile spread across Lyra's bloodied face. "Spoken like a true Lunaris queen." Thorn stepped forward, concern etched in his weathered features. "The Chamber of Ascension is sacred, Ilara. The ritual is dangerous even with proper preparation. Without it—" "What happens in this chamber?" Ilara asked. "Your first transformation will be triggered and guided," Ravencroft explained. "The moon's power will be focused through ancient crystals, accelerating and amplifying the process. Your awakening will manifest at its strongest possible expression. And if I survive this ritual, what then? What power am I supposed to have that terrifies these hunters so much?" Again, that significant look passed between her newfound family members. Finally, Lyra spoke. "The ancient texts speak of one who will come when our kind faces extinction. One with the power to break the boundary between human and wolf, not just for themselves, but for others." She paused, her amber eyes locked on Ilara's. "If the prophecy is true, you could turn humans into Lunaris, rebuilding our numbers from those who choose to join us. Or you could force the change on unwilling humans, creating an army of shifters bound to your will." The implications staggered Ilara. That's why they're hunting me. They think I'll create an army and wage war on humanity." "Would you?" Ravencroft asked quietly, his expression unreadable. Before she could answer, a thunderous explosion shook the cavern, sending small crystals cascading from the ceiling. Dust filled the air as shouts and howls echoed from the distant tunnels. "They're using black powder," Thorn growled. "They've reached the lower chambers already." "We're out of time," Lyra said, grabbing Ilara's arm. "The Chamber of Ascension. Now!" As they hurried toward a narrow passage at the far end of the cavern, another explosion rocked the mountain, closer this time. The sounds of fighting grew louder. Snarls, screams, the distinctive whine of silver weapons cutting through flesh. Ravencroft fell into step beside Ilara. "Whatever you decide in that chamber," he said urgently, "know that power without wisdom is merely destruction with purpose. Your mother understood this. I hope you do as well. The passage narrowed, twisting upward through the heart of the mountain. As they climbed, the blue light of the main cavern faded behind them, replaced by a strange, pulsing glow ahead, silver tinged with crimson, like moonlight filtered through blood. Finally, they emerged into a smaller chamber directly beneath the mountain's peak. A natural skylight opened to the night sky, where the nearly full moon hung directly overhead. Directly below this opening stood a raised dais of polished black stone, surrounded by a circle of massive crystals that towered over them like silent sentinels. "The Chamber of Ascension," Thorn announced, his voice hushed with reverence. Ilara approached the dais slowly, drawn by something she couldn't articulate, a call in her blood, a recognition beyond conscious thought. The crystals seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat, growing brighter as she neared. "What do I do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Stand at the center," Lyra instructed. "The rest will happen naturally when the moon reaches its zenith." Another explosion shook the chamber, this one close enough to dislodge small stones from the walls. The sounds of battle had reached the main cavern. "They're coming!" Ravencroft warned, moving to the chamber entrance. "I'll hold them as long as I can." "I'll join you," Thorn said, already beginning his transformation, his massive frame contorting as fur sprouted along his arms. Lyra turned to Ilara, gripping her shoulders tightly. "Listen to me carefully. Once the awakening begins, you will face a choice, a vision of two paths. The texts speak of fire and ice, of vengeance and forgiveness. Choose wisely, child. The future of our kind depends on it." With those cryptic words, she pressed a fierce kiss to Ilara's forehead and turned to join the others at the chamber entrance, her body already shifting as she moved. Alone on the dais, Ilara gazed up at the moon through the skylight, feeling its pull like a physical touch on her skin. The wolf-headed dagger at her belt grew warm against her hip, the amber eyes in its hilt beginning to glow with the same pulsing rhythm as the surrounding crystals. From the passage came the sounds of desperate battle, snarls, screams, the clang of weapons, her newfound family fighting and dying to give her this chance. As the moon reached its zenith, its light concentrated through the skylight like a silver spear, striking the dais where Ilara stood. The crystals flared blindingly bright, and a circle of blue fire erupted around her, cutting her off from the battle beyond. Pain, unlike anything she had ever known, coursed through her body. Her bones cracked and reformed, her muscles tore and reknit, her very skin seemed to ripple and shift. She fell to her knees, a scream tearing from her throat that transformed mid-cry into a howl. Through the agony, through the fire, through the sound of her own body breaking and remaking itself, Ilara heard the chamber door splinter. Hunters poured in, led by a figure she recognized even through her pain-blurred vision. Lord Barton, his face contorted with righteous hatred, a silver sword raised high. "Kill the abomination," he roared, "before she completes the awakening." As her transformation reached its peak, the world around Ilara faded away. The chamber, the battle, even her own body seemed distant and unimportant as her consciousness expanded beyond physical limitations. In this strange liminal space between human and wolf, between life and death, she finally understood what her grandmother had meant. Before her materialized two distinct paths. One blazing with vengeful fire, promising power to punish those who had wronged her kind, the other gleaming with cool, healing light, offering reconciliation and a new beginning. And standing at the crossroads between these paths was a familiar figure, her mother, copper hair flowing like a banner, arms outstretched in welcome. "Choose," her mother whispered, the word echoing through Ilara's transformed consciousness. "But choose carefully, my daughter. Some paths, once taken, can never be abandoned." Ilara stood suspended between realities, the physical world of battle and blood fading to insignificance as she faced her mother's spirit and the diverging paths of her destiny. Time seemed meaningless in this place of transition, this sacred space between human and wolf, between what was and what could be. "Mother," she whispered, her voice both her own and something older, wilder. I don't understand. How can I choose when I don't know what these paths truly mean? Sarah's ghostly form smiled, her eyes, so like Ilara's own, filled with an ancient wisdom. The path of fire promises vengeance, power over your enemies, the ability to bend humans to your will. You could create an army of Lunaris, force the transformation upon those who have persecuted our kind, and rule as the prophecies foretold. She gestured toward the burning road, where shadowy figures knelt in submission before a powerful wolf queen with gleaming amber eyes. And the other path? Ilara asked, her gaze drawn to the cooler, silvery light that seemed to pulse with a gentler rhythm. Healing, reconciliation, the power to offer the gift of transformation only to those who choose it freely, to build bridges between our kinds rather than wage war. Sarah's expression softened. It is the harder path, my daughter. Forgiveness always demands more courage than vengeance. In the physical realm, slowed to near stillness in this moment of choosing, Ilara dimly perceived the battle raging around her protective circle of blue fire. Ravencroft fought with supernatural speed, his elegant movements belying the deadly force behind each strike. Lyra and Thorn, magnificent in their wolf forms, held back the tide of hunters with desperate ferocity. And approaching the circle of fire, Lord Barton raised his silver sword, his face twisted with hatred and fear. "They're dying for me," Ilara said, anguish threading through her voice. "How can I choose forgiveness when they slaughter my family, when they've hunted us to the edge of extinction? Because extinction awaits down both paths," her mother replied solemnly. "One quick, one slow, but certain either way. Vengeance begets vengeance, daughter. An army created by force will inspire greater fear, greater hatred, greater weapons against us. The cycle will continue until nothing remains." Ilara closed her eyes, feeling the wolf rising within her, its power surging through her transformed body. The temptation of the fire path pulled at her, the seductive promise of making her enemies pay, of never being powerless again. "What would you choose?" she asked her mother. Sarah's smile turned sad. "I cannot choose for you. This is your awakening, your destiny. I can only tell you that I died protecting what I loved, not destroying what I hated." There was peace in that choice, even at the end. In the chamber, Barton had reached the edge of the blue fire, his silver sword gleaming as he searched for a way through. Behind him, one of the hunters notched a silver-tipped arrow in his bow, taking aim at Ilara's heart. "I must choose now," Ilara realized, feeling the moment of transformation reaching its zenith. The wolf within her howled for release, for completion. She looked at her mother one last time, drinking in the face she had never truly known in life. "I love you," she said simply. "I wish we'd had time. We have eternity, my daughter. Whatever you choose, I will always be with you." Sarah's form began to fade. "Remember who you are, not just a Lunaris, not just a queen, but Ilara, my daughter, descendant of wolves who chose to live alongside humans, not rule over them." As her mother vanished, Ilara turned to face the diverging paths. The fire beckoned, promising power and retribution. The silver light offered a harder road, but one that might, just might, lead to something beyond mere survival. With a deep breath, Ilara stepped forward, making her choice. In the Chamber of Ascension, the circle of blue fire suddenly expanded, engulfing the entire room in blinding light. Hunters and defenders alike froze as waves of power radiated from the transformed figure at the center. Where Ilara had stood, a wolf now rose, larger than any Lunaris should be for their first transformation, its fur a rich copper color that seemed to capture and hold the moonlight. Its eyes blazed not with amber fire, but with a clear silver light that reflected nothing and revealed everything. Lord Barton stumbled backward, his silver sword falling from nerveless fingers. "Kill it!" he screamed, terror replacing his hatred. "Kill the abomination now!" The hunter released his silver-tipped arrow. It flew true, aimed directly at the great wolf's heart, and stopped inches from its target, suspended in mid-air before dissolving into silver dust that scattered to the floor. The wolf that was Ilara moved forward with deliberate grace, its massive paws leaving prints of softly glowing silver light with each step. As it approached, hunters found themselves unable to move, their weapons suddenly unbearably heavy in their hands. "What sorcery is this?" Barton hissed, scrambling backward until he hit the chamber wall. "What have you become?" The wolf's form shimmered, and suddenly Ilara stood before him. Not the kitchen slave he had known, but something greater, her copper hair floating around her as if underwater, her eyes still shining with that unsettling silver light. When she spoke, her voice carried the harmonic echo of wolf and woman combined. "I have become what you feared," she said, her voice resonating through the chamber. "But not what you expected." She turned to survey the frozen tableau of battle. Hunters and Lunaris locked in combat, blood spilled on both sides, centuries of hatred crystallized in a single moment of violence. "Enough," she commanded, and the single word seemed to vibrate through the very stone of the mountain. The fighting stilled, all eyes drawn to her glowing form. Even Ravencroft paused, his bloodied hands lowering as he watched her with an expression of wonder and uncertainty. "For too long, our kinds have been locked in this cycle of violence," Ilara continued, her voice gaining strength. "Hunters becoming the monsters they claim to fight, my people reduced to animals by fear and persecution. It ends tonight." She moved to where a young hunter lay wounded, blood pooling beneath him from Lyra's claws. Kneeling beside him, she placed her hand over his wound. Silver light flowed from her palm, seeping into his torn flesh, which knit together beneath her touch. The hunter stared at her in disbelief, then at his healed side. "How?" "I chose healing over hurting," Ilara said simply. "I offer the same choice to all of you." She rose and faced the assembled hunters and Lunaris. "I could force transformation on you all," she told the humans. "I could bind you to my will, create the army you so feared. Instead, I offer a different path." Extending her hands, palms upward, Ilara summoned her newfound power. Above her, the moon seemed to pulse in response, its light intensifying through the skylight. The massive crystals surrounding the dais began to resonate, emitting a tone so pure it brought tears to the eyes of all who heard it. From her palms rose twin spheres of light, one the warm copper of her wolf form, one the cool silver of her awakening. They orbited each other, spinning faster until they merged into a single orb of opalescent brilliance. "I offer truth," she declared. "The gift of seeing clearly, of understanding deeply. No more secrets, no more fear of the unknown." She released the orb, which expanded rapidly, passing through everyone in the chamber like a wave of gentle lightning. As it touched each person, hunter or Lunaris, their eyes momentarily glowed with the same silver light as Ilara's. Lord Barton gasped, clutching his chest as the light passed through him. "What have you done to us?" he demanded, his voice shaking. "I've given you the ability to truly see us," Ilara explained, "and to truly see yourselves." Around the chamber, the hunters looked at the Lunaris with new eyes, seeing not monsters but people, different, yet kindred. Some fell to their knees in shame, others stood paralyzed with the revelation of their own hatred. "The choice remains yours," Ilara continued. "Continue hunting us, with the burden of knowing exactly what you destroy, or help build a world where our kinds can coexist." She turned to her grandmother, who had shifted back to human form and now stood wrapped in Ravencroft's cloak, her eyes wide with astonishment. "And we must choose as well," Ilara told the assembled Lunaris. "Continue hiding, nursing ancient grudges, or step into the light and show humanity who we truly are." Lyra approached her granddaughter slowly, wonder and caution warring in her expression. "The prophecy spoke of transformation, but not like this. You've taken a path none of us foresaw, because it wasn't written," Ilara said softly. "It had to be chosen." A commotion at the chamber entrance drew their attention. More hunters poured in, led by a tall figure in an ornate silver mask. the High Hunter, leader of those who had persecuted the magical races for generations. "Barton," the masked figure called, voice muffled behind the silver face. "Report. Has the abomination been contained?" Lord Barton looked from the High Hunter to Ilara, conflict evident in his face as he struggled with his new understanding. Before he could speak, Ilara stepped forward. "Remove your mask," she commanded the newcomer. "If you've come to judge me, at least do so with your true face." The High Hunter hesitated, then slowly raised gloved hands to the silver mask, lifting it away to reveal Agnes? Ilara gasped, recognizing the head chambermaid from Blackvale Castle. The older woman's stern face showed no surprise at being recognized. "Did you think the High Hunter would be a man?" she asked coldly. "Men are too easily distracted by power, too quick to compromise. Women remember. Women endure." "You were watching me," Ilara realized. "All those years in the castle, you knew what I was." "I suspected," Agnes corrected. "The signs were there for those trained to see them. Your unusual eyes, your rapid healing, your unnatural strength when emotional. When Lord Ravencroft showed interest in you, my suspicions were confirmed." She gestured to her hunters. "Enough talk. The abomination must be destroyed before it corrupts more minds." "Wait," Lord Barton interposed himself between Agnes and Ilara. "She's not what we thought. She could have destroyed us all, turned us against our will. Instead, she showed mercy." "She's bewitched you," Agnes snapped. "Like her kind always do. They appear gentle until they have the advantage. Then they reveal their true nature." "True nature?" Ilara echoed. "You've spent your life hunting my kind, yet you know nothing of our true nature." She stepped closer to Agnes, silver light still shimmering around her. "But I know yours. The light showed me your story too." Agnes faltered, her hand moving to the high collar of her hunting leathers. "Show them," Ilara said gently. "Show them why you hate us so much." With shaking hands, Agnes pulled down her collar to reveal an old scar, 5 parallel lines across her throat, the unmistakable mark of werewolf claws. "My entire family," she whispered, voice suddenly fragile. "Slaughtered by your kind when I was just a girl. I alone survived, marked but alive, dedicated to ensuring no other child would suffer as I did." "I'm sorry for your pain," Ilara said sincerely, "but the cycle of vengeance ends here. You've made orphans of countless Lunaris children. Will their suffering justify creating more hunters? When does it stop, Agnes?" The chamber fell silent as the weight of her words settled over the assembly. In that stillness, the moon reached the exact center of the skylight, bathing Ilara in pure, undiluted moonlight that seemed to pass through her, illuminating her from within. "I offer you a choice," she said, addressing everyone present. "Continue the path of destruction, or help me build something new, a sanctuary not hidden in mountains, but established in the open, where humans and Lunaris can learn from each other, where fear gives way to understanding." She held out her hand to Agnes. "Even you, who has hunted us for so long, especially you, your knowledge, your strength, imagine them directed toward protection rather than persecution." Agnes stared at the offered hand, decades of hatred warring with the newfound understanding Ilara's light had forced upon her. "It's not that simple," she said finally. "Some wounds never heal. Perhaps not completely," Ilara acknowledged, "but they can transform us rather than define us. The choice is yours." For a long moment, the fate of both kinds hung in the balance as Agnes struggled with her decision. Then, slowly, she placed her weapon on the ground. "I cannot take your hand," she said quietly. "Not yet. Perhaps not ever. But I will not raise my blade against you today. The hunters under my command will withdraw." She raised her voice to address her followers. "We return to the Citadel. There is much to reconsider in light of what we've witnessed here." As the hunters began to file out, Agnes paused at the chamber entrance. "This isn't peace, Ilara Lunaris. Not truly. But perhaps it's the beginning of something that might someday lead there." With those words, she disappeared into the passageway, her hunters following behind. In the sudden quiet of their departure, Elara felt the enormous strain of the awakening crash over her. The silver light faded from her eyes as she swayed on her feet, exhaustion threatening to overwhelm her. Before she could fall, Ravencroft was beside her, supporting her with gentle strength. "Well played, little rebel," he murmured, something like admiration in his dark eyes. "Though I admit you surprised even me." "A diplomatic Lunaris," Lyra said, shaking her head in wonder as she approached. Whoever would have thought it? Lord Barton, still processing everything he had experienced, stepped forward hesitantly. "What happens now?" he asked, looking lost without the certainty of his hatred. "Now," Elara said wearily, "we begin the real work. Building bridges is harder than burning them." Thorn, having resumed his human form, regarded her with newfound respect. "The sanctum is yours to command, Queen Elara. What would you have us do?" "Stop hiding," she replied without hesitation. "Start living openly again, cautiously at first, in designated territories agreed upon with human authorities. Show them we are not the monsters of their nightmares." Her gaze swept the chamber, taking in the faces of those who had fought for her, those who had hunted her, those who still looked to her with uncertainty. The path ahead won't be easy. Centuries of fear and hatred won't disappear overnight. But for the first time in generations, we have a chance for something beyond mere survival. She turned to Ravencroft, whose crimson eyes watched her with an intensity that sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. "Will your kind stand with us?" she asked. The alliance between Nightwalkers and Lunaris was once legendary. Could it be again? A slow smile spread across his aristocratic features. "I think, Elara Lunaris, that you will find the Nightwalkers very interested in the new world you envision, particularly if you continue to defy expectations so magnificently." As dawn approached, Elara stood at the mountain's peak, watching the horizon lighten with the promise of a new day. Beside her, Lyra and Ravencroft flanked her like sentinels, guardians of the fragile hope she had kindled. "Will it work?" she asked softly, uncertainty finally creeping into her voice now that the immediate danger had passed. "Can centuries of hatred truly be overcome?" Lyra slipped an arm around her granddaughter's shoulders. "I don't know," she admitted, "but for the first time since I lost your mother, I believe it's possible." Ravencroft remained silent, his gaze fixed on the lightening sky. As a creature of darkness, he would soon need to seek shelter from the coming day. Yet he lingered, seemingly reluctant to leave Elara's side. "Dawn comes," she reminded him gently. "Some things," he replied, his voice low and resonant with meaning, "are worth facing the light for." As the first rays of sunrise crested the distant mountains, Elara felt a strange peace settle over her. She had chosen a difficult path, one filled with uncertainty and the real possibility of failure. But it was her choice, not forced upon her by prophecy or heritage or the expectations of others. In that moment, kitchen slave and Lunaris queen, human and wolf, she finally understood what true power meant. Not dominion over others, but mastery of oneself. Not the ability to destroy, but the courage to create. And as the new day dawned on a world forever changed by her choosing, Elara Lunaris lifted her face to the light and smiled.